So, as you can probably guess from the picture, and probably more importantly from the title of the video, we're going to be looking at markets now. So in order to anticipate and satisfy the needs of customers, organisations need to understand what market they're in, and they need to be able to identify their potential customers and the buyer behaviour of those customers. So what we're going to look at here is the different types of markets, the factors that influence the demand in these markets as well. So what actually is a market? Well, there's our definition, where buyers and sellers come together to exchange goods or services. So we must remember that when we are looking at markets, it's not always physical goods, so it's not always something you can hold in your hand. It sometimes is a service, so it can be something like the market for holidays, for instance. You can't hold a holiday in your hands, it's not physical, so it's a service. But it's where buyers of these services and sellers of these services, that's where they come together. Traditionally, markets were physical places, so that was what I showed you at the beginning there. Often in the middle of a town, so market squares, that's usually in the middle of a town. However, as a result of developments in communication, many markets exist through postal markets, postal services, so mail order markets. They might be linked by telephones, and very much more often now being linked by the internet. So it means we can classify markets, so we can classify where buyers and sellers meet, where buyers and sellers meet in different ways. So let's look at the first way. First one we can look at is this idea of geographical segmentation. So segmentation is called a geography. So it's when we it means that we can target geographical areas. So we might look at local, we might look at national, or we might look at international. So local markets, this is the most common form of market for consumer goods. Individuals tend to buy products within a limited geographical area close to where they live. So you wouldn't go down to York to buy a newspaper. You wouldn't drive across to Manchester to buy your groceries. You buy them in your local area. Local markets include the traditional type of market, so again, that picture I showed you at the beginning, where fresh produce can be sold in a market stall. Most towns and cities have a place where the local population can visit a number of market stalls, often on a particular day of the week. Or it might be on a bank holiday, there might be a bigger one as well. It means that they can purchase things such as fresh fruit and vegetables. Car boot sales, as we've got an example here, are a more recent example of this type of market. Again, you wouldn't travel too far to go to a car boot sale. Local markets are particularly common when personal services are being purchased, as people will not want to travel too far to benefit from them. So for example, hairdressers and sports centres. You wouldn't travel to Birmingham just to get your hair cut. The same logic applies to services provided in the home by plumbers and electricians, who again tend to be local businesses. The vast majority of goods purchased in person by the consumer will have been bought in a local market, as consumers are reluctant to travel long distances because of the cost and time involved. So it's not just services that we buy in a local market, it's goods as well. Traditionally, the local market was centred on the high street of a particular town or city, but recently there's been a growing tendency for out-of-town shopping centres to develop. It should be noted though that although markets may be local, the companies operating in city centres and out-of-town centres are invariable national companies, in some cases multinationals. So even though the geographical type of market is local, not everyone is like this lady here. They're not just focused in one area. So say for instance on the high street you might have a Starbucks. So that's in a local market. You wouldn't travel to a Starbucks 50 miles away. You would still stay in your local market, but Starbucks is a multinational company. I've pointed out here perishable goods. So perishable goods are things that will go off or won't last very long. So when components are perishable or they're expensive to transport, a local market may be used in preference to a national market. So for example, supermarkets purchase fresh fruit and vegetables locally for this reason. The supermarkets have also found this policy improves their image as they are seen to be supporting the local community. So by Tesco, for instance, using a local market, they might buy their fruit and veg from this local market. So that not only means that these perishable goods might last longer because they haven't been transported for 2 or 3 days in a truck, so those 2 or 3 days extra, they can be sat in Tesco. So it means that they've got a longer lifespan. Not only that, but by using this local market, it means that they get a better image of supporting the local community. A national market can be defined in 2 ways. So firstly, a company would see itself as operating in a national market if it sold its products or services across most or all of the all of the country. So organisations such as Marks and Spencer's or Ford or Barclays would see themselves as operating in a national market, although their individual outlets tend to compete locally for the customers in a particular geographical area. So you can have a national market which we then break down into a local market. So in that example then, Marks and Spencer's might advertise nationally but have lots of different local stores, so they still operate in a local market. The second way that we could define it is that many industrial and primary products such as building materials, gravel, machine parts, electronic equipment are traded on a national or even international scale. So if you were to buy some bricks to build a house, you wouldn't necessarily just stay in a local market this time. You might find the cheapest supply might be somewhere in the southwest of England, a couple of 100 miles away, so that's a national market. The organisation that produce these products mainly deal in providing products that are components of consumer goods made by other organisations. Therefore, they compete in a national market in order to persuade companies that make consumer goods to buy their components or materials. The reason for all we've looked here, obviously just at local and national, there are international markets, but you've got one of the things we have to keep remembering, I keep pointing out, is that bus 1, what we're looking at, this paper that we're looking at, is for new startups. So think to yourself, would misspelled that, but you get my point. Would an international business be something that be something that a new startup would be targeting? It probably wouldn't be. So we'll only really look at local markets and national markets. We can also break it down into physical and non-physical markets as well. So again, there's our good example of our physical market, the example I showed you at the beginning, a traditional market, and there's eBay, a non-physical market. So this classification is based on the way in which the products are bought and sold. So physical markets are the traditional view of a market. In a physical market, there is an actual place where buyers and sellers meet. So this can be an actual marketplace, a shop, a garage, or some other business premises. Invariably, the product itself can be seen, you can touch it, you can hold it, you can see whether it would fit your needs, you can see whether it would physically fit, so the purchaser can make a well-reasoned decision about whether it is worth the price being charged. The opposite of this is the non-physical or the electronic market. So for many goods and services, the traditional physical market is being replaced by the marketplace that takes advantages of the opportunities presented by modern technology. So first of all, it was telephone sales, which have been used for some products over a very long period of time. But in the last decade, there's been a rapid increase in the use of the internet as a marketplace. For firms producing certain goods and services, these electronic methods of buying and selling present both opportunities and challenges. So electronic markets are of particular significance to startups because they do allow small firms to compete in a national market without the high levels of capital that were previously required. So this one's the obvious one that new businesses might go for, but this one might be very useful. If you were starting a business, you could realistically start a business from your bedroom. You could make Christmas cards, for instance, in your bedroom, and you could particularly use eBay to sell them. You wouldn't need any premises, and you could, in theory, target a whole national market purely by using these electronic marketplaces. So that's just a reminder there. Would we necessarily target an international market as a startup? Probably not, but it's worthwhile you knowing that these international markets do exist. There are some other ways that we can classify markets. So they can be classified by the type of customer that we have. So are they male, are they female, are we old, are we young, are they rich, are they poor? This is what we call market segmentation. So we break the market down into segments, or they can be classified according to the level of competition in the market. So is there lots of competition, so it's very competitive, or is there no competition whatsoever? Is it a monopoly? Both of these we come on to in later topics, so we're not going to look too much detail of them now. So the nature of the market, we need to know what is actually going on in it. What does our market do? What does it actually sell? So firms need to recognise the nature of the market that they're in. So for instance, McDonald's might want to think about, do they just sell food, or are they in the market for providing a social occasion, so where people go to meet to have some kind of food together? TGI Fridays, if you ask their management, their owners, they would actually say they're in the entertainment industry rather than being a food provider. When Apple are developing their products, do they first of all think of the technology that's gone into them, or do they think of how to make them look fashionable? If they make them look fashionable, perhaps it will mean that more people will buy them. So are they in the fashion market, or are they in the technology market? I always come back to Amiga watches. When I was at university, we had one of the marketing directors of Amiga who gave us a lecture. And he went to great pains to point out that he didn't believe that his watch company was actually in the market for watches. He said if you wanted a watch, you could pay £1 for a watch and it would do exactly the same job. You could just replace it every couple of months when it broke or when you got it wet. You could do that for the rest of your life and you still wouldn't spend as much money as if you bought an Amiga watch. So the point he was making out was he thought his company was actually in the jewellery market, but it was a piece of jewellery that happened to tell the time. So because he knew his market was for jewellery, he knew that he had to make it look good. He had to design his product to look good, to look classy, and to have a good brand image so people would buy it as a piece of jewellery rather than going and buying a £1 watch. So until the business knows exactly what market they're in, they can't target it. And you can't know what market you're in until you decide what your product is. So because McDonald's have thought, are we providing social occasions? That's why it is you can book birthday parties, for instance. So TGI Fridays have thought, we're in the entertainment business. That's why you can, a lot of them have things like face painters and what have you on a weekend. Apple have realised that they not only sell technology, but they sell fashionable technology. So they make sure that their design is cutting edge. And Amiga, as I've said, they realise they sell jewellery rather than just watches, so they must have the really high quality design in their products. So we've got to work out what our product actually is before we can work out what market we're in. And until we know what market we're in, we can't target that market. So we can't go after the customers in that market. So it's very important, as I say, that we know what our product actually is. An example, though, of doing that is there's a company called Superjam. It was set up by a lad who was 14 years old, and his idea was to sell jam in the local area around Edinburgh, because he knew that there would be a strong demand, a strong local demand. There was a strong local market, but Waitrose noticed the supermarket chain, they noticed just how popular it was, so they took it into a national market. So he had to think about, or Waitrose had to think about how they could turn a product from a local market into a national market. Okay, let's look at demand then. It's a word that you'll have heard used before, but as is so often the case, we have to have a definition that the exam board like and that exam board want you to use. So demand is the amount of product or service. Remember, service as well. It's not just physical things we can hold in our hands. It can be things like haircuts, holidays, mobile phone service that consumers are willing and able to buy at a given price over a period of time. Let's break that down. So you want to buy something, you have to be able to, it's not just that you're able, it's not just that you have the money to buy something in order to demand it, you have to be willing to actually go out and buy it. And at a given price. So that suggests if it's a given price, that demand might change depending on price. So it might be that over a period of time, price might change, which means that demand changes. So bear that in mind. Demand doesn't just stay the same. The level of Kellogg's cornflakes hasn't stayed at the same level from the day that they were first launched. The demand for CDs is going down, even though the price is coming down as well. So let's talk about what can influence this demand. Well, first of all, let's look at price then. So as the price of a product rises, the demand for it will usually fall. I say usually, there are other factors, but at this time, that's what we need to remember. So as the price of something rises, the demand for it will usually fall. So price up, demand down. This is partly because consumers will think more carefully about whether the product is required, but also because alternative products will appear more attractive in comparison with the initial product. So once the price goes up, we start to look at alternatives. So if the price for, think of electricity supplies at the moment, price of electricity is going up almost daily. So people are looking for alternatives, or they're looking for substitutes so they can change their supplier. So if Npower put their price up, then demand will go down. So price up equals demand down. This is me trying to write on an iPad, so it's not looking great. So for products that are necessities that have no close alternatives or substitutes, an increase in price will make little difference to the quantity demanded. So say for instance when petrol goes up in price, I don't demand any less of it because I've got to drive to work. In contrast though, if the product is not a necessity and has many close substitutes, an increase in the price can lead to a quite dramatic fall in the quantity demanded. So let's think, if the price of cans of Coca-Cola go up, because there are so many other substitutes, you could get Pepsi instead, if the price goes up, then the amount demanded will massively fall. The extent to which price influences demand is known as price elasticity, but again that's something else we'll come on to in a later chapter, or a later video. The same logic applies to a fall in price though. A fall in price will lead to a rise in demand. That seems logical. If something's cheaper, then more people will want it. A fall in price will lead to a rise in demand of, let me think of an example. If the price of iPads, for instance, comes down to when they've been launched for a while, more people demand them. The degree of change will depend on factors such as how necessary the product is or whether there are substitutes. Let's look at the income and wealth of consumers. So the demand for a product is connected not only to a consumer's willingness to buy, but also their ability to purchase it. So it's not just whether you want to buy it, but are you able to buy it? To some extent, the ability does depend on the price. So if the price of something goes up, you might become less able to buy it. But it also depends on the income and the wealth of the customer. So as consumer incomes increase, their overall demand for products also increase. So if you've got more money, the theory is that you'll want to buy more stuff. You'll just want to buy more of everything. So furthermore, the pattern of consumers' demand changes. They will start to buy more luxuries. So think about, as an example, baked beans. If you have more money, you might buy Heinz baked beans rather than Smart Price baked beans. So you might start buying more expensive things. Or if you think of it, luxuries in terms of another example, you might start going on holiday to the Caribbean rather than a holiday to Spain. One of the keys to Tesco's success in recent years has been its wide provision of goods. So it's got a value range targeted mainly at people on low incomes to the finest range aimed at wealthier customers. This means that people will always be able to find products that appeal to them regardless of their income level. Taste and fashion then. Over time, fashion and people's taste change. So such changes affect the demand for products and services. For instance, changes in working patterns tend to mean that fewer families sit down in the evening for a traditionally produced family meal sitting around a table, often because of a lack of time. So the people preparing the meal might still be at work, so people are more likely to buy takeaways now, or convenience food, so pre-packed food, frozen meals for instance, as opposed to the ingredients for meals that might take some time to prepare. So what the theory is there, that people might buy a frozen lasagna rather than making a lasagna from scratch, for instance. In contrast, people now tend to spend more time shopping and therefore are likely to spend time relaxing in a coffee shop or a restaurant whilst on a shopping trip. So the demand for fresh food might go down, but the demand for restaurant food might go up, purely because of working patterns, for instance. Some items, notably but not exclusively clothing, are often prone to swings in demand according to what's fashionable at the time. So we often say that fashion comes around in every 7 years. A fashion will come in, something will come in and out of fashion. So the demand for something might fall, and then 7 years later it might rise again. So because of this, businesses in these industries must keep a close eye on latest trends in order to cater for the changes in demand. So H&M are a good example of that. They have people watching catwalk shows all around the world to make sure that they can react very quickly to changes in fashion to make sure that their demand is always high. So this is where good market research is the key to making sure that you've got good or high demand. Notice that I've put reduces risk. I keep stressing that to you. We can't remove risk. We always just try to reduce it wherever possible. The price of other goods will also influence demand. So sometimes the demand for a product can be influenced by the price of totally different products. So this occurs when we either have substitutes or complements. Substitutes are goods that are close alternatives to a particular product. So if the price of a substitute increases, the original product will appear much better value in comparison. So an example could be Coca-Cola again. So if the price of a can of Pepsi goes up by 5 pence, even though the price of Coca-Cola might not have changed, Coca-Cola now seems a much better value product. So the demand for Coca-Cola might go up without their price even changing at all, purely because the price of a substitute product has gone up. Also though, a fall in the price of Pepsi could lead to Coca-Cola looking too expensive and people stopping buying it. Complementary products are ones that are used alongside each other, such as fish and chips, shampoo and conditioner. So if the demand for one of these products increases, the demand for the complement will also increase. So for example, if fish becomes more expensive, people will be less likely to buy it, so the demand for chips will fall, even though the price of chips remains the same. So another example of that could be if the price of the new iPhone went up, for instance, the sales of iPhone cases would fall because less people would be buying iPhones. Okay, next one are demographic factors. For those of you who haven't heard this word before, demographics are just things that relate to the population of a country or population of an area. So the UK population has grown in recent years, and this has led to an increase in overall demand. So on average, the demand for everything has gone up because the overall population has also gone up. Alongside this overall increase, there have been changes to the geographical spread of the population, its ethnic balance, and the size of households and the age distribution. So there are more older people, so the demand for holidays that cater for older people, for instance, might have gone up. These have all led to changes in demand though. So for example, the changes in geographical spread of the population has increased the demand for supermarkets in the southeast of England. Immigration has grown, has meant that products such as Indian food in the UK has grown, and the growing number of individuals living alone has led to an increase in building of flats rather than houses. An ageing population might mean that there might be more old people's homes, for instance. Okay, marketing and advertising can also have an impact. So successful marketing and promotion can have a major impact on the demand for a good or a service. Remember, I keep stressing, it's not just goods, it's services as well. Innocent Smoothies believe that their use of public relations has helped its growth. So they're trying to really point out that they're innocent, they have organic ingredients, they're just fruit and veg in there, and they think that's helped their sales. So that's good advertising, for instance. Think about what happened to the sales of Cadbury when that advert came out with the gorilla playing the drums, for instance. So again, good marketing this time. The creation of a strong brand can also lead to consumers being prepared to pay a higher price for a product. Think about the really good examples, Apple. People pay purely because they want the brand to be associated with the brand of Apple. Yes, their products are good, but Apple probably get away with charging more purely because of their branding. Competitors can also have an impact on demand. So the demand for a product will be influenced by what these competitors do. So in addition to price changes, a competitor may introduce a new product or increase the popularity of an existing product through effective marketing. So it's not just our marketing and advertising and branding, it can be that of competitors. So they can reduce price, which might influence our demand, or they might bring out a new product, or they can make their existing product seem more attractive. But the reverse does apply. So if your competitors are ineffective at marketing and advertising, then this may help to benefit our business from an increase in demand for products. There might be seasonal factors, for instance. The time of year does have a massive impact on demand. So products such as porridge and ice cream have huge fluctuations during summer and winter. So you wouldn't necessarily buy ice cream in winter, and there aren't really great sales of porridge in the summer. You wouldn't necessarily see Christmas cards in July. So the seasons can affect what we buy and when. Businesses do try to overcome these fluctuations by providing a range of goods. So H&M, for instance, changes its stock according to the season, so that demand is more evenly spread throughout the year. So that's why you might see ice cream shops actually closing in the winter. So they don't have to pay their bills, they don't have to pay their overheads in the winter, or they might sell chips in the winter to try and balance out that demand. It's quite difficult to ensure that there are no seasonal fluctuations at all. It's just how we balance it as a business. Government as well can influence the demand for a product. So in order to encourage demand, the government can subsidise a product to reduce its price. So for instance, at the moment, electric cars have subsidies. So subsidies are a way of reducing the price. So if you buy an electric car, you get a subsidy of around about £5,000, I think it is at the moment, from the government, so you're more inclined to buy it. Alternatively, the government can introduce its own advertising campaigns to encourage you to purchase a product that it regards as being desirable. Let me think. Pensions are a good example of this at the moment. The government is trying to get a lot of people who wouldn't necessarily have a pension to enrol in one. So because of that, there's a lot of advertising being done about that, so the demand for pensions has gone up. When I was 10 years of age, I remember that you didn't have to wear a seatbelt in a car. But the government introduced legislation which meant that all cars had to have seatbelts. Therefore, the demand for people buying seatbelts, for car manufacturers buying seatbelts, went up. If it ever happened that the government banned smoking, for instance, the demand for smoking would go down. In fact, the demand for cigarettes went down when people couldn't smoke indoors, in pubs, for instance. If the government wishes to reduce demand for a product, it can also do it through taxation. So again, cigarettes are heavily taxed, and this leads to a much higher price. The government also may use advertising to discourage a product being bought. So the way that cigarettes are advertised with the smoking kills message on, for instance. Or it can introduce legislation or laws to restrict the advertising or use of a product, or to ban it altogether. Strangely, the demand for cheese in the late years of 2007, 2008 really fell. So the demand for cheese fell because the government decided that it was an unhealthy product and therefore couldn't be advertised during children's television programs. Around about the same time, there was a ban on advertising smoking in public as well, which saw demand for cigarettes fall. It's also meant that demand for complementary products of cigarettes, things like going to the bingo or going to the pub, that is also, the demand for those have also fallen because some people have been put off visiting because they can't smoke indoors. And just to end this video as a little examiner's tip, there are many factors that can affect demand. You've got to look for clues in the case study. They're not going to necessarily tell you outright. You've got to look for clues as to what might cause a change in demand. So it could be one of those factors we've just talked about. You might be able to pick out that there's seasonal factors. So it might say that it only works in the summer. It might say that there's new government legislation. It might say that in the case study that the firm is particularly good at advertising. Or it might say that they have to put their prices up. So it might be obvious, but also you might need to work it out. For instance, if in the case study it mentioned that less tumble dryers were being bought in the UK, you could make the assumption, therefore, that if you were in the market making clothes pegs, that your demand might go up, because as people aren't using tumble dryers, they have to dry their clothes outside. And this one is a actual true one. Because of the increase in Polish workers in the UK, the demand in Wetherspoons for the beer Tyskie has gone up, purely because that's a Polish beer. It's the biggest selling beer in Poland. So we can look for clues in the market. We can look for clues in the case study which can help us work these things out. So we're not always going to be told in the case study. We've got to try and use our logical business brains and think, if this happens, what will happen here? So if this changes, what will happen to demand of something else?